Hello and welcome to my podcast, Used to Be's Do Count, with me, Dean James. You're listening to episode number 6, I Used to Be a People Pleaser. In this episode, I speak with Amir Sardari about some of the behaviours he displayed as a people pleaser and the toxic relationships that cultivated.
So I invested a lot. I put a lot of emphasis on my relationships, on my friendships. And so the result of that was that I have then developed friendships that were no longer serving me, because I was always seeking in others what I was missing in myself.
Amir reflects so honestly about how his people-pleasing behaviours and habits allowed him to ignore his own instincts.
Throughout the relationship, there were signs that I chose to ignore. So I chose to ignore my instincts. And that was, upon reflection, my people pleaser role showing up. I can make this work. Yes, let's do that. Yes, let's do that. You don't want to do that? Well, we don't have to do that. It was constant. And when you're living with somebody, there's nowhere for you to go.
Let's dive right in. Amir, hello. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast and giving the time to tell your story. I really do appreciate it. Your name is Amir Sardari, for those of you who don't know you.
If not, why not?
Exactly. Get to know. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, where you are in the world and what you're doing.
So I'm currently living in the UAE, in Dubai in particular, and I head up the people and culture function with a particular focus on learning and development, leadership development, for an organization that franchises brands, licenses and launches them in the Middle East.
Wonderful. People and culture, such an important job. I want to hear a little bit about that actually, and how that is fulfilling and enriching your life. But as we know, we do want to focus most of today's conversation on your used to be. So what was your used to be?
Well, Dean, I used to be a people pleaser.
So a people pleaser, I think this is a very common term. It's very commonly used these days. And I think a lot of people will relate to this. But I just want to frame this for a second. What is a people pleaser? And I'm going to ask you, what is a people pleaser to you? Like what your responses were. But from a psychological point of view, people pleasing can be seen as one of your adrenaline responses to conflict. So when adrenaline pumps around your body, when you've got conflict in front of you, a response to that conflict historically has always been fight or flight. We've heard that a lot, right? Fight or flight response. From a psychological practice and standpoint, there was also freeze. So there was fight or flight or freeze. The most recent one is actually fawn. It's the fourth adrenaline response to conflict. And fawn would be another word for people pleasing. So this is to appease that conflict, to please that person and stop that conflict. From a psychological point of view, that's what it means. What does it mean in your context?
Similar along those lines. You know, for me, how it was showing up was that I would just invest a lot in other people and put a lot of my own happiness, I suppose, dependent on the happiness of others. You know, following on and adding on to your point, actually, there's a psychologist described this. They actually call it sociotropy. And I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but there's a term for people pleasing that psychologists use called sociotropy. Although I was probably never that clinical, it is around having excessive investments in your interpersonal relationships. And for that, yes, I am guilty.
What usually happens, and I say usually because it's not the same, you know, we're talking about psychology here. It's never the same for everyone. But how it usually develops is in the home as a child. Growing up. So it's a kind of response to your environment growing up, and then that kind of starts to spill out in other parts of your life. So for us to kind of understand that, when did you first realize that you were a people pleaser?
So I don't suppose there was an actual time that I woke up and thought, oh goodness, I'm a people pleaser. It didn't really happen for me like that. It wasn't an aha moment, if I'm honest. It was, for me, upon reflection, years later, yes, absolutely. The behaviors I displayed were in line with somebody that I was wanting to please. But at the time, even when I had made the the decision to change, I still didn't pin that on people pleasing, because pleasing people for me was just something that was born out of kindness and wanting to, make other people feel good and comfortable. And I saw that as my role.
Yeah, it's interesting you saw that as your role. I mean, it is about pleasing the other person, even to the point of detriment towards yourself. So it is a role that you take on. And I'm really glad that you said the word role, because there is a common misconception that being a people pleaser is a personality trait. It's part of your personality. It's part of your makeup. When in fact, it's actually a response. It's a role that you play and a response that you take to situations, and that response is learned. And like I said, it's usually learned in childhood, and it's usually learned in the home growing up.
I consider myself, and actually my childhood, I consider myself quite lucky, and most definitely blessed in many many ways. I had parents that allowed me to explore my passions, to take risks, to cultivate my own happiness and my joys and exploration of that. And I could see that that wasn't always the case for my friends. I come from a 2.4 family. Some of my friends came from broken homes. And so by comparison, I could always appreciate how blessed I was, whether that would be coming from parents that were together, or taking a holiday a year, was something that reminded me how blessed I was. And I suppose part of me wanted to share those experiences with other people that maybe weren't so fortunate in their family home.
Interesting.
And
You felt secure, safe, supported in your home.
yeah, as a whole, I did.
A lot of the time people say that this is a trauma response to a dysfunctional home, dysfunctional relationship, but you're kind of saying that it wasn't necessarily like that.
I understood that sharing those joys, people pleasing, allowed me access into worlds that might not have been available to me otherwise. And so then, looking at it from a cultural perspective, in my home life, I'm from a Persian family, and we take people pleasing to a whole another level. We believe that guests are God's friends. And so when it comes to hosting, people pleasing, making sure everybody is okay, it is rooted in my culture.
That's really interesting as well, because
Mm,
like I said, the psychological studies would say that this comes from dysfunction in the home, potentially, dysfunctional relationships or abusive relationships. But actually, there's a cultural piece to this. Ensuring your guests are pleased was deep rooted into your culture, into your growing up. And you also said, which was interesting, that part of your motivation was to give people on the outside of your home, so all of your peers and other people that you were in touch with, to give them a taste of the security that you felt, which is why you would
yeah.
go above and beyond to do that.
Yeah, if I was to think back, a lot of my actions were not necessarily from a guilt, but more a case of I just saw people didn't always, or weren't able to, So I just did whatever I could, I suppose. Just following on from the cultural piece, I can see definite links towards being the host within my friend group, or being the glue, as sometimes people might describe me. I'm the person that brings people together, and a lot of that was rooted in my people pleasing. I was once described quite wonderfully as the straw that stirs the drink. And so, I took that on. I took that role on.
Yeah.
Now, within the home, I didn't feel like I needed to people please. I think that if we're going into childhood, I really do believe that I was looking for the same protection from others outside of my parental care. And so that's what I was searching for. I was searching for protection, the same way I felt protected by my parents and accepted by my parents. The world had a different agenda, and was quite cruel.
it's a
Yeah,
big scary world out there, and when you
yeah,
feel safe and secure and protected within your home, so you were trying to replicate that feeling of safety, security, protection outside when the world is a
yeah.
scary place. So the people pleasing was in order for you to try to find that feeling outside of the home.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of behaviors were you displaying within your friendship circles, within your peer groups then? What kind of things were you doing?
The best way I could describe it is that it was almost like the ultimate FOMO. I had to be places. I wanted to go there. I wanted to be at the parties, invited along. And so I would change my behavior in order to accommodate matching those expectations.
You want to be at the party, in the party, center of
Yeah.
the party.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
thrived
All
in
of
that
the
role.
above.
Yeah,
All of the above. Yeah.
and you wanted
Absolutely.
everyone else to be at that party as well, having a good time. You said you sort of took on that role, right? So I'm kind of like picturing you to pull everyone in, come to the party, have a good time. You were that person.
Yeah. It's so much so that how it would show up was that at whatever occasion, if somebody wasn't having a good time, I would do my best to try to accommodate them or just to make it not so awkward as well, just to kind of keep things all above board.
So if you were doing all of that work, then you weren't necessarily in the moment for yourself, having a good time for yourself.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Yeah.
So you would sacrifice your own experience to ensure that everyone else's experience was the best it could possibly be.
I didn't realize that at the time, but upon reflection, yeah, that there was definitely an element of that. I cared a lot about what other people thought.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and the experience that they were having. So if
Hmm.
somebody wasn't having a good time, and that could
Hmm.
have been for a number of reasons, if they wasn't having a good time, how would that make you feel?
Well, I would just shapeshift to try to make sure that they enjoyed themselves. But the golden rule that I learned only later on in life is that when you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. And I think that was where the root of a lot of my conflict came, was that I tried to please everybody, and in actual effect, please nobody. And so that sort of was a real lesson for me, but only later on.
Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, the reason why I asked that is because you are putting quite a lot of emphasis on your own happiness or success. I think, like,
mm, mm,
I'm saying the word success because I guess you come away from, let's say, a night out, right? We're sort of looking at a scenario where we're on a night out with our friends in a bar or a club or whatever it is. Your own happiness, success, enjoyment of the night really comes from everybody else enjoying it around you. So if one person is not having so much of a good time, then that causes you, I guess, to not feel successful in your role. Would that be true to say?
yeah,
Yeah, so you
yeah.
were putting a lot of emphasis on other people's experiences in order
Mm.
to feel like your own experience was successful, I guess. I keep coming back to that word successful.
Well, because we're seeking a result in anything we do, we always seek a result, right? There's a payoff somewhere. What my payoff was making sure, did everybody have a great time? Fantastic. That means it was a good night. And so I invested a lot. I put a lot of emphasis on my relationships, on my friendships. And so the result of that was that I had then developed friendships that were no longer serving me, because I was always seeking in others what I was missing in myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You were putting a lot of time and effort and energy into these relationships as a people pleaser, and then you realized those relationships were not serving you anymore. When did you start to realize that?
I suppose I had known it for some time, but it took me a time to adjust. Outside of my parents, both whom I consider my greatest friends, even at this stage of life, traveling together, loving each other, confiding in each other, trusting each other, I feel so blessed to have that dynamic with them. And again, still to this day, I consider myself very lucky to have that with them. And again, it's more around this yearning outside of that. And so it took me a while to determine which relationships were working for me and which were not. I found myself in webs of my own making, chaos, but not being able to understand why. Going through life with the philosophy of the answer is yes. What's the question?
Yeah. Before the question was there, interesting.
The answer was yes. And as I reflect on these, it was actually, they were all lessons in disguise, but it took me a while to adjust. You know, the relationships and the friendships that I had, none of them were fruitless. They all taught me something, but they were sometimes built on the fact of me being a people pleaser from myself. What I could control. I could control the fact that I had built these relationships and these friendships from a place of inauthenticity.
Yeah, at the time you don't know you're doing it, do you? Did you feel at the time that you were just being authentic?
Yeah, I was having a great time.
Yeah.
You know, for me, there was nothing in that that was abnormal because I didn't know any different.
So some of the common things of people pleasing are being agreeable, and you already said having difficulty to say no. You already said I already said yes before I heard the question. Being adverse to conflict, which can cause being stressed and overwhelmed. There's also a response that makes some people passive aggressive because you're not being true to yourself, even though you think you are. Were those things true for you?
Yeah. When you are not living authentically, then you are susceptible to anything. You can get blown any way the wind blows. And so therefore, the relationships that I did have were also not really rooted in too much trust because although I was faithful and loyal, I knew myself that it didn't always feel as though I was following my heart. I was
Mm.
going against my instincts. An example that I could give to you that was a real turning point for me was getting out of a toxic relationship that I was in. And at the time, I was living abroad, away from my friends and from my family, and we were living together. And throughout the relationship, there were signs that I chose to ignore. So I chose to ignore my instincts that I knew something was not quite right here.
Yeah.
And that was, upon reflection, my people pleaser role showing up. I can make this work. Yes, let's do that. Yes, let's do that. You don't want to do that? Well, we don't have to do that. It was constant. And when you're living with somebody, there's nowhere for you to go. You're stuck, right? And so I just knew that there was something not quite right. And even so, I ignored it. I pushed it down and I just said, I can make this work. I'd suppressed all of my instincts, that actually it began to show on me physically. And I developed, it sounds fabulous, but it's really not. It's something called alopecia areata. And so basically, sounds fabulous. Not so much. My beard
Sounds like a
started to
drag
fall
queen
out.
name.
It is somewhere along the lines. So my beard fell out. And it's basically when your body attacks hair follicles as if it's a germ, and it's caused by severe stress. So this suppressing of my instincts, this wanting to people please, this not just being able to stand up and say enough, actually started to show on me physically. So for me, that was my rock bottom. There's no cure for alopecia areata. And that was my rock bottom.
Yeah, the rock bottom that you felt from that was because of a physical response that you were feeling and seeing on the outside. And for so many years, you said you would just like ignore your instincts, hold it down, push it down. I think maybe it's easier to do with friends because we were speaking a lot about friends and friendship circles. And as we change and move and flow, our friends come and go. Some few stay with us for a long time, but it's easy to get out of that. But when you're in a relationship, it's so much more intense. When you're living with that person, it's so much more intense. And you said that you didn't really feel like you could go anywhere. You know, there was no escape from that. So that was your big realization. Before that moment, you didn't actually realize too much that your role as a people pleaser was having a detrimental effect on you until that moment.
Yeah, it just goes to show how vain I am, Dean. Until it started to show physically, I didn't really have to deal with it. But I didn't recognize myself.
You said your beard was falling out. Just explain a little bit about the symptoms. So was it patchy? How was the other parts of your body, your skin? What happened?
No, everything else was fine. As somebody that's Persian, like I am hairy anyway. But actually, across my neck, there would just be sort of patches missing that I couldn't explain. And so it became that I would look in the mirror and just no longer recognize myself.
Really?
Yeah.
I think for anyone who's in a toxic or has been in a toxic relationship, they would have heard you say something and said, that's exactly what I did. Ignoring your instincts and ignoring all of the red flags. And I think when you come out of a toxic situation, you look back and you go, oh my goodness, all of the red flags were there from the very, very start. And I ignored them all. And I knew deep down that they were all showing their ugly face, but I chose to ignore them all. And I heard you say that, and I've experienced that myself. And I know that anyone in a toxic relationship will have done the same. So hopefully, like you have been, people are reflective and they don't make the same mistake twice. So from that situation that you were in with that partner, was that a big learning curve for you? Was that a big changing point in your behaviors?
It was the start. It didn't happen overnight. And for anybody that's listening, it's not easy. Changing behaviors, unlearning things is really difficult.
Absolutely.
But I had to start pouring back into myself. Otherwise, I would just continue to sink.
So how did you come out of that relationship?
I packed my bags. There was definitely moments at which I explored my suspicions, and my suspicions were confirmed. So from that point, I had to be accountable for it. You know, it's easy to stay when you don't know, or when you ignore, or when you sort of turn a blind eye. It's a lot easier to stay. But when you know
Ignorance
something,
is bliss.
ignorance is definitely bliss. But when you know something, it makes it almost impossible. So I knew from then. I packed my bags. I ended the relationship, and I had this outlook of being self first.
Okay, so first of all, where were you in the world?
South Africa.
You were in South Africa. Okay.
Yeah.
And how long were you in this relationship?
3 years.
And you were living together for, I'm guessing, most of that time?
About a year and a half, 2 years, yeah.
A year and a half, about half of that time you were living together. And what realizations were confirmed? What exactly are you talking about?
There was a lot of extracurricular activities from his side. And also, you know, I think that what was causing me a lot of stress was the fact that I would know things, I would see things, but I was made to feel as though I was crazy.
Well, this is somebody with narcissistic traits to make you feel like it's your problem or you're imagining it when they've been cornered, backed into a corner as such. They always point the finger in the other direction. So you were starting to question yourself and your own belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until one day it just became, it was staring me in the face. I couldn't turn away from it. And so to stay would just be, it just wouldn't be good. I had to, when the universe talks, you have to listen, and God will throw the pebbles before he throws the rocks. And I ignored the pebbles, but could not ignore the rock.
Amazing. I love that analogy. So true.
Mm.
So true. Coming out of that relationship, you packed your bag, you undeniably having to face the reality of the situation, and you left. And then I'm guessing that you started to go on a self-reflecting journey from what I'm hearing. Why did you ignore those red flags? Why did you go along for the ride for so long? You think that this was part of the role that you were playing as a people pleaser?
Yeah, I made a choice. We were talking before about turning points. I distinctly remember making the choice to really focus in. Again, I wasn't describing it as being a people pleaser, but I remember thinking self first, not selfish. Self first, not selfish. And I surrendered to that. And I took myself on a crash course. You know, somehow they have these crash course for driving, where you can like do it in 6 weeks. So I therapized myself, and 6 weeks.
You did a
still going, but 6 weeks was my initial plan.
6 years later,
10 years later, still going.
10 years
because
later.
it's an ongoing journey, and but that decision was pivotal for me.
Okay, I mean, this is a really important lesson, isn't it? Can you do a crash course of self-help in 6 weeks and fix yourself?
Clearly not.
No, absolutely not. It's not possible. This
Mm.
kind of stuff is ongoing. This is daily practice, and there is not an end point to that. There
Mm.
shouldn't be, I'm going to go on this journey and fix myself, but that you start to try to adopt ongoing daily practices of self-love and living in a better way. So yeah, don't think that you can go on a crash course to fix all of your issues and 6 weeks later you're going to be fine. It's ongoing, isn't it? It's an ongoing practice. But that was maybe the start of you looking internally, self-reflecting, looking for that external help to help you internally. What kind of things did you do then? What kind of things were you looking for?
So it wasn't that I necessarily changed anything in my day to day, but behind the scenes, I could just sense this sort of seismic shift. I ended that relationship, took control of my life, and to your point, it was more like just constant gentle pressure. I hear people say a lot, I don't want drama in my life. I don't want drama in my life. I don't want drama in my life. Well, life is dramatic. And that's one thing I learned. If you've ever watched a flower bloom, that's dramatic. And so for me at that point, I was assessing and removing all of the cheap, unnecessary drama from my life. That was a key point for me, that I accepted that there will be times that may not go the way that I want them to. But what was currently in my life that was sort of taking me off track, I would say, and being an unnecessary distraction.
So you were trying to control the things that you were able to control at that level.
Yeah, pretty much.
And we can control parts of the drama around us. I love that you said that life is dramatic. If you've ever watched a flower bloom, right? It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
What a dramatic.
It's dramatic.
That is a really lovely analogy. There are certain aspects of life that I will never be able to control when it's going to bring drama, but I am equipped to deal with those things the more I live on this planet, because you live and you grow thick skin and all of those things. But I've learned to control the drama around me that I put around me or that I allow around me, and it's exactly what you were saying before. Life is dramatic. But there are certain parts of that we can control.
So why God gave you elbows, Dean. God gave you elbows to keep some people here.
To elbow them in the face, you mean?
No, not to elbow them in the face. No, it's to hold people at arm's length or to pull people close. That's it. You just got to know who to hold close and who to elbow in the face. That's it. Life's lessons.
Life lessons indeed. Although it is a joke, don't go round elbowing anyone in the face. Hello, I hope you are enjoying Amir's account of being a people pleaser, and maybe you're relating yourself. If you are, there are a couple of links in the show notes that might give you a little bit more information about what it means to be a people pleaser and some of the tools to stop those behaviours. Remember, these are behaviours and habits and responses. That means that they can change.
We can control certain parts and elements of our lives. There are certain things that are uncontrollable that we have to give away trying to control, essentially. But there are people that are just dramatic. It's almost like that's their comfort zone, to live in a high intensity, dramatic environment. And there are other people, they turn away from that. Of course, it's dramatic and there's going to be peaks and troughs and highs and lows, but high drama, high intensity all of the time is not necessarily right for some people. And some people, they are used to that, and that's where they thrive, and that's what they seek in relationships. Where are you in that scale of drama?
Well, that point in my life, it was high octane. Hold on to your pants. Every day's a drama. And that was the choice that I made. I removed unnecessary cheap drama from my life. And, in Zen Buddhism, there's something called the beginner's mind. They say that the mind should be like an empty rice bowl, because if it's empty, it has room to receive. And so if we go through our life thinking that we've got everything figured out, then we are actually, in essence, unteachable. At that point, I was really having to scale myself back and empty my mind from what I had learned and what I had been actioning, because it just was not serving me. And it was a perfect time. It was the perfect time for me to reevaluate.
Why? What made it such a perfect time?
The ending of that relationship. That's why it was so pivotal for me, because it made it so that I was starting afresh. I was moving out physically, metaphysically, starting again.
So what kind of things did you put in place? What tools did you use? What things did you do to go on that journey?
Look, I want to preface this with saying that every day presents its own challenges. Every day presents opportunity to fail, but also opportunities to win. So what I was doing at the time was just to be able to hold myself accountable. I started looking around at the people in my life, and I'd realized that I'd started to cultivate some unhealthy relationships. There were people that were emotionally dependent upon me. There were people that were emotionally blackmailing me. There were people that just really just seemed to not like me so much. And so would display toxic behavior towards me. People that I'm incredibly, sort of to this day, still alerts me when people blame others for their situation. Whenever you're pointing a finger, be aware that there are 3 fingers pointing back. And so for me, what I made a conscious effort to do was to see the road I didn't want to go down. I saw people acting in ways I didn't want to associate myself with. I saw people blaming others for the way in which they were acting. All things that, for me personally, would not serve the person I wanted to be.
It's interesting that the first response to the question was about a shedding of some of the people around you. I really truly believe this. We are only as good as the people that we spend our time with. I really do believe it. I believe that people are such a strong service or disservice to us, and we need to find the people that are serving what we're trying to do. There is a transition in yourself which allows you to sort of almost step outside of yourself and look down from the outside and go, look at all of these people around me. They're not really serving me anymore. And then there's a shedding of those people. There's a backing away of those people, which some people can do like that. Sometimes it takes some time to back away from those relationships or cut those toxic people out. How did that happen? Did it take its time? Did you do it in a gentle way? Did you do it in a really quick, instant way?
It varied. I think some of them were easier to do than others. Some were a case of me having to change and then seeing if they were still around once I'd made that change.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily the ending of friendships. It was more a case of assessing the behaviors that I'd allowed into my life. I'd allowed people to treat me in a certain way. And so I took accountability for the way in which I had acted, and also the way in which I had acted that allowed people to treat me in that way. So it was a 360 evaluation.
You said earlier that when we were talking about your childhood or teenagehood, that you'd almost orchestrated those relationships based on your people-pleasing behaviors. The role that you took orchestrated that. So this is a real big turning point in coming away from that role or identifying as a people pleaser. Like, no, I take responsibility for my part in this, but I don't want this anymore. So something needs to change in you. There are a lot of people out there that I think can identify with being a people pleaser and putting other people first and being a yes person and putting their own happiness on the back burner. If they were trying to come away from those behaviors, do you have any advice or tools that they can look at and do to help them with that? Because like you said, it's a long journey, right? Changing learned behavior is difficult. So what kind of things were you putting in place?
Well, in terms of mechanism that I would put into place, the first real shift comes to your point around assessing who is around you. Are these people that are in your corner? Don't have anybody in your circle that's not in your corner. And are these people celebrating you? Because we know it. It's sometimes just a case of just opening up our eyes and our ears to what we already know, and just stop ignoring those things. They say that when you're reading something up close, you're not really able to see it as clearly as if you were to hold it from a bit of a distance. So just hold things from a distance.
I'm just thinking about this changed behavior around the circle that you're already in. But as an adult, we're always meeting new people. It could be through work, it could be through moving environments. How do you not take those learned behaviors to new relationships that you're building? How do you stop those habits?
I'll quote the wonderful Jay Shetty. I don't know if you're aware of Jay Shetty, but he has this great quote that's something, I might be paraphrasing it now, but there's a difference between people that hurt you by making a mistake and people that hurt you by continuing a pattern. Mistakes can be forgiven, patterns should be broken. And that was, for me, really crucial. I broke patterns.
Yeah, wonderful. Jay Shetty's fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there for him, and he's written incredible books. That's lovely.
On this journey, there's a temptation to say, well, why am I not fixed? Why am I still doing it? And I suppose that acceptance, there's a real temptation to open the oven door whilst the bread is cooking, and thus, seeing if it's ready, and thus by opening the oven door you ensure that it's never cooked and never ready. So just be okay with being on that journey and learning, because things like this take time. I removed people that just didn't really make me feel good anymore, and fed into people that were really, really assured, I suppose, for want of a better word, sort of assured and confident. I suppose full circle for me, going back into what was sort of missing in my childhood, was that I, in my adult life, started to look for role models. And those role models for me were older women. As I started to cultivate new friendships, I was amazed at how assured some of these women that I had brought into my life were. I've got quite a caustic sense of humour. I admit that. I've got quite an acid tongue, and I think you need quite a thick skin in order to be around me. But I love that about myself, and I truly accept that that's just part of who I am. But on this journey, I learned to listen a lot more to people. And so there were several things, one of which listening was a piece, and finding role models in particularly older women, because they normalized the no for me. They normalized the no. Do you want to go here? No. Okay. It didn't end the friendship. There was no argument. It was just easy. And I appreciated that, because it showed me how to be.
So you're embracing the power of no, which is a beautiful thing. No has a lot of power that we need to embrace all the time for ourselves. That's one thing. The other thing you said, self first, not selfish, which I love. You can't really be there for other people unless you put yourself first, and that is not being selfish. Being selfish is something very different. So I loved that. What other things are you doing now to know that you are not a people pleaser? So how do you know that you're not people pleasing on a day-to-day basis? And I'm thinking about the whole thing, your friendships, your work relationships, how you are in the world, how you stand in the world.
I suppose what really is giving me the ability to continue to grow is forgiveness. Forgiveness for me played a key role in my growth and my ongoing growth. I was learning some really painful lessons about myself and coming to terms with the fact that I had nobody to blame except myself for the situations that I found myself in. But forgiving myself for that and setting new boundaries by learning to say no was pivotal and crucial. I think that you fall into neglecting your own health, neglecting your own personal responsibilities. And like I say, it came at a cost of my own personal relationships. And so I think if every day you can just try to forgive the things that have happened before and start to forge new pathways, I think that really plays a key role, because it helps you build new behaviors and unlearn old ones.
Yeah, there's definitely different neuro pathways that you need to be able to form, especially when, like I said, it's not a personality trait, it's a response. It's a response, but people take it on as a personality trait. So if somebody says, I'm a people pleaser, they absorb that identity. They think that is so much part of them. And the reason why I said at the start of this is that it's not, it's a mask. It's a response. It's a mask that we put on, and it's a response to situations. So unlearning that is possible, but repathing those neurological pathways is slow and steady wins the race, right? So in order to sort of unpack, I guess the word is association, or it's like dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
Cognitive
exactly
dissonance.
Yes. Cognitive dissonance. That's what I was thinking of. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we're on the same wavelength. Cognitive dissonance. The reason why I bring that up is because there is this thought, or there is this feeling of unease based on opposition, and the opposition comes from your mind and what you feel and think versus the action that you take. An example might be you disagree with the farming industry and you are an animal lover, but you also enjoy eating meat. This would be a good example of how your action and your thoughts and feelings are opposites. So as a people pleaser, you are kind of doing that, right? You are ignoring your instincts, you're going against your natural feelings in order for pleasing other people, even to your own detriment.
So there is a bit of study that says there are 4 main things that will help you do this, right? Thought. You already had those thoughts. You were trying to make that change. Attitude. You mentioned forgiveness and forgiveness in yourself. I think this is an attitude, personal value, and behaviors. So thought, attitude, personal value, and behaviors. Those are the 4 key things in order for you to try to change the discomfort that you feel. How was your experience with that? Thought, attitude, personal value, behavior. I mean, it's a big question, but is there any specific sort of examples or?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned thought, because one of the things that shifted for me was that I stopped reading books and I started studying books. So I read a lot of non-fiction, and one of those books was called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And I actually bought it before I'd even read it. I bought it for a few of the people in my life. And it's a book that I often go back to, and sharing information, especially when it comes to books, is probably one of the greatest kindnesses that we can do. But within that book, it's about the study of mindfulness, which is the awareness of thoughts. So at that time, it really helped me to be able to regulate my own feelings and created the awareness of thought for me. And I was able to have physical exercises that I could practice whenever the voices became too much or the chaos started. And so, to your point around thought, is the awareness of the thoughts, and that the fact that you are aware of them, you are not of them, is the key for me.
Amazing. And this is about mindfulness and meditation, and it takes practice, and it takes a bit of time to get used to that, especially if you don't do that. But thoughts come and go. So we can choose to give power to certain thoughts and not to other thoughts, right? So the practice of mindfulness and meditation is allowing thoughts to come and go that don't serve you, and giving, the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about the planet, it changes us. It changes our makeup. That's a wonderful book. So where are you now then? How are you feeling now in your kind of placing the universe? How is not being a people pleaser sort of serving your day-to-day life,
I can genuinely say that the relationships I have in my life today are a lot more genuine, a lot more authentic, from a place of authenticity. I listen a lot more. Before, whenever people would bring things to me in terms of what was going on in their life, I, as a people pleaser, would take that on myself and try to solve that for them. But actually, sometimes people just want a listening board. They just want a sounding board. And so now I'm able to really understand the difference and go into that from a lot more of a mature approach, in terms of just asking people, okay, what is it you want from me, from this conversation? How can I help? But also knowing my own limits. and setting those boundaries in place with people, and having people in my life that don't take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Boundaries are huge, and that is a big learning curve, and it comes with age and experience and being in the world for a while, putting in your own boundaries, and yeah, making sure that people are not taking advantage of those. As your job role kind of forced you to do a lot of studying and learning about this stuff, so your own professional and personal development kind of comes from the job role that you're in now. You got the job because of your skills, absolutely. You've got those skills there, but when you step into that role, you then need to do some learning and development yourself, right?
Rooted in personal development, and the theory that we use is called the IKEA effect. And in essence, the IKEA effect is when you build something yourself, you place a higher level of value onto it. And IKEA have sort of made a fortune playing into that theory. So we apply that same logic to our development. If I have a part to play in my development, I have a lot more level of accountability to the success, as opposed to sometimes in our leadership, we can be given things to do, or we can be told this is where you're going, and therefore we have no investment. But the IKEA effect actually shows that the accountability is more so on us if we have built or played a part in the creation of something. You don't want to be a hypocrite, right? You don't want to be practicing to people and telling them the things that they need to be doing and not practicing it yourself. So again, it goes back to the accountability piece. To make sure that, you know, the things that you're expecting from other people, you're also doing yourself. So it holds me accountable. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of study related to the role that I do when it comes to self or personal development, whether that be technical skills or behavioral skills.
Yeah, all of the soft skill part of it. Do you think that's helped you come out of those people pleasing behaviors naturally?
It's definitely contributed to it, because I suppose being able to be comfortable with where I am and living authentically is really helped me to be okay with the no. And actually, when you're okay with the no, people appreciate that. They appreciate that honesty.
Yeah, they know where they stand. I love a no. I love it if somebody says no, I know exactly where I stand, and I never ever take it personally. And I think that most people don't take it personally. If you say no to them, I think most people are smart enough to understand that that is your response. That has nothing to do with me. But then you know where you are with that person.
Yeah, so I would say that people definitely know where they are with me, whether personally or professionally. But it's just, you know, part of my own growth that I've had to put things into place that help me move away from where I was. And it's not to say that there aren't elements that resurface every now and again that come through. Absolutely, but I can recognize it. I can recognize when I'm doing something, I couldn't really get out of it. It's just a bit more normalized now, as opposed to just needing to say yes because there was something missing in myself.
Yeah, wonderful. It's not necessarily always 100% changed behavior. You do fall into bad habits, but it's the awareness and the recognition of that that allows you to just go, no, this is not serving me. And you change those behaviors.
I think for me, what I've started to do really well is understand the give and the take, and that life is a dance. And within that dance, you are doing things that maybe going above and beyond for others, as I like to call it now. But in the same breath, they also hold that in high regard and return that back to you. So it's not always no, it's just not always yes. And something that really, you know, I've started to think about, and especially even with the title of this podcast is "Used to Be's Do Count," and understanding part of where our identity used to be. You know, what I've been really enjoying about your podcast sessions is the level of accountability that I'm hearing come through, and I think that's really important. to be able to identify, I used to be this, and not to dismiss it, but to understand how it shaped who you are, and also not blame that experience for anything. We are exactly where we are supposed to be. And that's the key theme for me, that I really enjoy listening into it, because it's really about somebody owning up. This is what I used to do, because without that, it probably means you're still in it. Unless you're able to look back, you're still there.
You're still there. And the celebration of the transformation. We are always transforming. We are always evolving. We are always changing. People say people don't change. Our people don't change. Rubbish. We're always changing. We're always learning. We're always moving, ebbing, flowing, changing. Always. So we're just looking back at the celebration of that. You know, I used to be this person. I used to be in this situation, in this state of mind, in this identity, and now I'm not. And, you know, we're only where we are and who we are because of where we used to be. Let's face it. You can only be stepping into your power as not being a people pleaser because you've gone through all of those experiences, understanding that you were cultivating unhealthy relationships by being a people pleaser. So what's next for you then? Is there anything happening that you want to tell us about that we can get excited about for you?
Oh, bless. Thank you. I suppose I'm really thankful of my life today, because I'm able to achieve some of my own personal dreams that I wanted to achieve, big and small. So there's, personal investments that I have. There's the fact of just giving up smoking, something I thought I would never be able to do. And again, mindfulness has helped me through that. I am moving in with my partner. And again, for me, reliving trauma, it's amazing what you can achieve when you have the right people around you, and how some of those insecurities that were so prominent for you, that were so real for you, can be really dispelled just by having people around you that you just don't have to worry about those things anymore. And so that's powerful for me and allows me to focus on strengthening those relationships.
Yeah. Good luck with moving in with your partner. It's a new partner. I'm guessing it's a new place. It's a new situation. You seem to be in a different situation. So you mentioned reliving trauma, but, you know, actually that's put to bed. And like you said, there's a new feeling around your behavior and around the people that are in your life. So I think it's going to be a very different experience by the sounds of things. So I wish you all the best with that. Is there anything else that you want to say about people pleasing and about your experience as a people pleaser for anyone listening?
I suppose what I would want to leave you with is that through the days, as the days become a year, reflect upon, remember what to forget, what to hold on to, and what to regret. That would be my sort of my parting gift for your listeners.
That's lovely. Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for giving your story and wanting to inspire people and give advice. Good luck with everything, Amir. And hopefully we'll see you soon in the UK.
For sure. Thank you, Dean.
Wow, don't you think that Amir has the most soulful, sultry, warm, caramel-like voice that you can just listen to all day? I certainly did, and especially when he is imparting all of that wisdom, it was so apparent that he's done so much work on himself, that he's done so much studying, and he's really taken responsibility and accountability for all of his learnt behaviours, and he's done the work to unlearn them. And now he is cultivating healthy, positive relationships in his life. It was really inspiring. I don't think that I'm a people pleaser. I'm quite strong-willed, I dance to the beat of my own drum, and I never really identified as a people pleaser. But hearing Amir's story really made me reflect on my own behaviours, and I felt really inspired actually to make positive changes in my own life. I hope it did that for you too. I hope you felt inspired. And I just want to say to Amir, thank you so much for giving your time and giving all of your wisdom and your truth. And I wish you all the very best in the future. If you liked this episode, why don't you share it with a friend, a loved one, a family member? Go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, and also hit the share button. Do you know my listeners and community are building? There are hundreds upon hundreds of people listening right now that haven't shared this podcast. And I really rely on you guys to spread the word for me. So please, if you liked this episode, spread the word, spread the love. I really appreciate you. I appreciate your support, and I will see you very soon on another episode. Take care, be safe. I'll see you soon.